So good afternoon. I am Amara Collier from Tempe, Arizona campus. You do know this. So for my class, I'm conducting interviews on our education and its effects on students and what happens if we keep on reducing it and the way that it keeps going. And just to make sure, you're okay if I record this interview? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me.
No problem.
And would you like to give a little introduction to who you are?
I am Dr. Amber Coleman. I'm a postdoctoral scholar in art education here at Arizona State University. And I've been teaching as a higher education art educator for a couple of years now.
About how long would you say you've been in the art education field?
I would say almost 10 years.
Wow, that is that's quite a long time. Do you feel like there's been a change at all during the time that you've been a part of the art education community?
In terms of just
Like if there's been any kind of decline, if there's been an incline, maybe perhaps, just like if there's been any kind of change that you've been able to notice?
I think there's been shifts in terms of like including more critical perspectives, or kind of challenging some of the traditions or norms that have been typical in our education, but education generally. I think people are kind of speaking out about inequities in education, in the arts, in general as well.
And then just another like kind of base question, but do you believe that art is important for the development of kids of all ages?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alrighty. And while you've been part of the program, have you noticed any changes in the curriculum at all?
In this program?
In this program, in whatever program you've taught, if there's been any changes for the better or for worse?
That's a good question. I think from what I've seen, it just depends on where you are, what are kind of the values or hopes of the people or stakeholders within a particular area, within the school district, within the institution. I think some of those shifts are particularly seen in terms of like the ideas around kind of like DEI, like practices or policies. I think that's probably the most noticeable shift, as well as things in terms of like arts integration or STEAM and incorporating like this interdisciplinary approaches to having other subjects, specifically sciences. With art, I feel like those are probably some of the major shifts or changes that I feel like I've seen over the past couple of years.
And then have you noticed any difference in the students and the communities as these changes have been made to the program?
I think changes in terms of like students and communities, I think there is a desire to keep these programs going, or a recognition of like how important the arts and arts education are to our just general livelihood, and like what happens when you lose those things, how it impacts people, how people are kind of searching for meaning and connection when those things aren't present. And so I think that will just only continue as education, the art world kind of shifts with the times. I think people will just see like the relevancy even more, especially when those things are no longer present or not as present.
And then you've been talking a lot about how people have been putting more effort into keeping art education as a part of education. Have you been seeing those changes in art education of people being more passionate about that?
I think so. I think sometimes it's happening maybe outside of like traditional institutions, just because I think sometimes it can be hard to move those things forward in institutions that have been around a very long time. I think it's always a battle, I think, within the arts to kind of assert the value and like the rationale why these things should be funded or should be continued. because I think sometimes the output isn't always like connected to end goals that maybe are equated with like monetary value, but they have like very important like personal or emotional or individual value. And I think you are seeing people kind of push for those things. I think that's always been a consistent thing in art education, is having to kind of be an advocate for the work that we do. So I think that will just kind of continue, even more so, especially as like programming might be defunded, or shifts in policies around what can be taught or what can be done in certain spaces. So I think it will just potentially continue to grow, and maybe some of these efforts will just be happening out of like larger institutions.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you believe that we should be bringing more awareness and support to the art education program more than we already are?
I think so. I think being in a state like Arizona, with the knowledge of like education not being the most well funded, in comparison to other states, I think there's definitely a need to kind of continue that advocacy, continue to bring awareness to this. I think it's easy for a lot of people to maybe not know what is happening, or maybe not be aware of maybe the lack of support and funding that is occurring in our education programs. So I think it'll be critical to just kind of keep that going, so that way people are continuously aware of it.
All right, that is pretty much all the questions that I had for you today. Pretty short interview, but thank you for meeting with me today again, and I do believe that your experience and expertise is very important, especially for this, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
So, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.